Hi everyone, DM Matt here. I just heard from Rob, who is still in jolly old Kingdom of Mercia, and involved in, quoting from Rob here, a Guy Ritchie-style heist involving Sir Alan Moore, the original molds from first edition Rogue Trader models, and 5 million quid of Game Workshop stock. Assuming he isn't executed by an Imperial Commissar, he will be back from England to the States next week, where we will talk about Tasha's hideous guide to everything. In the meantime, as things are crazy here is our first ever replay episode, episode 82. Everyone can DM. There's still a lot to learn from this episode. A lot of our opinions on this episode have changed, and we want to replay it again because we want to bring you more of these style episodes in the very near future. Okay, here's your replay Dungeon Master of None. See you next week.
You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know.
Hello, welcome to Dungeon Master of None. I'm here with special guest, DM Rob. Rob, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Matt. Matt, this joke.
Rob, tell me a little bit about when you first got into Dungeons & Dragons.
Matt, this joke would have been better last episode after I had not been on for two, but I'm back now. This will be the third one where I'm back, but that's okay. I just got into D&D recently. I've never played before. I don't have a podcast. I haven't been doing this for 15 years.
15 goddamn years.
Goddamn years, at least.
The flower of your youth. Like, snuffed out. Like, as if it was thousands of French nobles dying at Agincourt.
My most vital years squandered, hunched over a D&D booklet. Hours upon hours wasted.
Candles on your desk, scribbling maps
with
and
the
stats.
Lord of the Rings role-playing game.
Oh no! I forgot about that. We've never talked about that.
We never have.
It was not good. That was a Decipher thing, wasn't it?
Was it? I was trying to remember what the It was an awful system. I tried very hard to make a craftsman dwarf.
Oh
work.
yeah.
The rules were so. I remember getting in an actual shouting match with one of my friends, with Brian, because the books tried to.
I remember. I was there. I was there, Rob. 2,000 years ago, I was there.
The books tried to model the Tolkien world, which meant that elves were better than everybody at everything.
Yes.
Up into including their horses, which were better than Rohirrim horses because they're elves. They're
not even the horse people get to have nice things.
Exactly. So if you're not an elf, you're mechanically inferior in every conceivable way. And I fucking hated it. We should talk about this.
We switched to playing Dungeons and Dragons again
pretty quickly. We realized pretty quickly that one, it was dumb, and two, we should just play D&D. But it had just come out, and we all loved Lord of the Rings in high school. We should save this for our How to Be Elves Real Good episode because we've gotten some requests.
Sure.
We should do an Elves and Dwarves episode where we go into a real deeper dive because some of our listeners wanted us to go deep on on elves
we will
and dwarves.
Delve too greedily and too deep into this topic.
Anyway,
Rob, so what are we going to talk about today?
Today, we're going to be talking about how to DM. We're going to be talking about the real basics. I got this idea because I was talking to a couple of people who were interested in the game but literally didn't know how to start. And
it's the hardest thing.
Yeah, and unlike Matt and I, they were not deeply steeped in nerd culture, but because of, Stranger Things, because of knowing me and appearing that, and I presenting as a vaguely normal person, but still liking Dungeons and Dragons.
Right, that's our skill. This is why people ask us, is
yes.
we present as normal.
Yeah.
For whatever your definition
I try
of
to,
that
until
is.
you get to know me better, not, rant about, dice or Thaco or the AD&D manual.
We shamefully own clothing that doesn't have a 80s 90s cartoon comic book character or something on it.
I don't.
If I had my choice, that's what I would wear all the time.
I don't drive anymore, but if I did, my van would not have an airbrushed wizard on the side. To my great shame, I'm not proud enough to do that. Anyway, so people were talking to me, and they just, they had no idea how to get started. Especially who's the DM and what do they do, and how do you do DMing? And I also read an article. I think it was an interview with Crawford. It was one of the main designers of D&D, and he was talking about how what they got the most requests for, or the offering in terms of like books and materials that they were missing the most was a basic how to DM guide. And so I started thinking about this, and I was like, oh yeah, we really are missing. Like, there's tons of advice on how to build a character and, like, world building and blah, blah, blah. But the Dungeon Master's Guide just jumps right to, here's a bunch of, like, charts and information, which is wonderful if you already know what you're doing. Yeah. But, like, how do you sit down and run a game? So Matt and I are going to start working on both a document, and we're going to do a few episodes on the real, like, fundamentals of this. Because it seems obvious if you've been doing this forever.
Emphasis on...
Fun.
Dentals. I don't know.
Emphasis on fundament. The sky is the limit. I don't know. I'm working on this here.
Well, Rob, as you know, before the flood, before there was
that
rain...
That would be firmament. I'm sorry.
There was this barrier around the world.
That's right. And that barrier was... the Dungeon Master, or yeah.
Well, so this is, I think, going to be a really great episode. So stick with us, Rob. Thanks for introducing our topic. But now, as punishment, I have a special surprise for you.
Oh, that's
before
right.
We get started.
I can't wait.
Rob, this segment hopefully will become a recurring segment. It's called Real or Fake. It's very complicated. I spent a long time on that title. I have a list of several published role-playing games. Some of them are real, Rob, and some of them are fake.
Okay. All right.
Now, your job, you might be able to guess what your job is. Your job is to guess which one is real and which one is fake.
Okay.
I can tell Rob hates this already, which is, I'm so happy. Okay.
No, I hate it, but I also love it. But I'm thinking we could call it Weal or Woe. I could be auguring the truth of these.
Weal or Woe. Rob, we're going to find out whether you're better than a random number generator at guessing the right answer, right? Because this is a true or false test. So if you're not above 50%,
most of us are dumber than a die.
Dumber than a die.
Most things. This is off topic, but most like stock traders can't beat like a like an actual like coin flip for picking the right things. So hopefully I'm as good as that. I'm not paid as much as a stock trader, but anyway. All right, give me the things.
Right. Well, now that we've according to what, like, Bayesian or analysis established the floor here. All right, let's see how far that ceiling up to the fundament goes. All right, here's your first one, Rob. Airship Pirates, RPGs based on the songs of Abney Park, from the creators of Clockwork and Chivalry and Victoriana RPGs comes the ultimate steampunk role-playing experience inspired by Seattle's revolutionary steampunk band, Abney Park. It's Airship Pirates, RPGs based on the songs of Abney Park, from the steampunk sky cities of Isla Ether and High Tortuga come Air Pirates. You hoist the Jolly Roger, spin your propellers, and take to the skies. Armored railroads connect the Emperor's widely scattered domains. In walled fog-shrouded cities, people huddle in Dickensian squalor, lorded over by the upper classes. You've got an airship. You've got a crew. You've got one of Dr. Calgori's fancy chrono-nautilus devices. All you need now is a good swig of rum. Trust us, you'll need it, and you're ready to set sail on the winds of time and plunder history itself. That's Airship Pirates, RPGs based on the songs
that is
of
100% real. There is no way that's not real. There's no way that's not real.
That's very real.
Too dumb. That's too dumb not to be real. That's too fucking dumb not to be real. No, I'm sorry. Sorry to fans of steampunk. We always dunk on it. Steampunk is fine. It's just it's too no.
That is a role-playing game based on a steampunk band.
I've never heard of Abney Park. There's no way that's not real. Okay.
Yeah, well, they're in your neck of the woods,
I can't
Rob.
wait. I'm going to
Please
look
go
up
see them.
Abney Park. I'm going to go to a show. I'm going to pick a fight with a guy in a top hat with steampunk goggles and, break his pocket watch. Anyway.
All right. Here's your next one, Rob. Bazinga, the official Big Bang Theory role-playing game.
Fucking off.
From Mobius Studios with special forward by Will Wheaton. After receiving the Nobel Prize, the Big Bang Gang must balance their new international physics fame with their geeky passions in this game of nerd-tastic comedy. Play as Sheldon, Hofstadter, Penny, Howard, Bernadette, Fowler, or Raj. Can you sneak into the Comic-Con panel while still making it to your talk on asymmetry theory at Caltech? Will you be able to deliver the ashes of Stephen Hawking back to Cambridge without stealing his original speech-generating device? Can you sabotage William Shatner's celebrity D&D game? Comes with 20 ready-made adventures plus the tools for you to create your own. Their nerdy laughs will never end. Bazinga, the official Big Bang Theory role-playing game.
That's real.
Now walk me through your reasoning here, Rob.
My reasoning is that we live in the worst of all possible worlds, and so the only thing that makes sense is for the Bazinga game to be a real game. It's too cruel and awful for it not to be a real thing.
I'm sorry, Rob, that guess knocked you down to coin flip territory.
Oh, thank God.
That's fake. I made that one up.
Wrong. Oh, thank God. I'm so glad that that's not real. I was on the fence when you talked about Stephen Hawking's ashes, but yeah, I was like...
Nope, that one's fake, but I think, yes, we live in dark times. All we need is a nudge towards the darkness, and that will happen very soon. That
was a very realistic thing for me to believe in, but
I think Rob and I's nightmares is being invited over to hang out with our wonderful families and them just wanting to watch The Big Bang Theory.
It's mostly...
they're beautiful, lovely, loving people, but they do love The Big
My nightmare
Bang
is having to talk about The Big Bang Theory. I would actually legitimately rather watch The Big Bang Theory than have to talk about it, is the thing. Like, that's the bigger problem. At least... Have
you seen the videos of The Big Bang Theory without the laugh track?
Yes, I have.
It's dark.
It's very... It's like, Garfield without Garfield territory. It is a mirror darkly, a glass darkly into a terrible alternative world. It is powerfully grim. All right, Matt. I assume you have one more of these.
Oh no, I've got several more. All right, here we go.
Matt, we're stopping at 3. You were gonna say.
No. Okay, sure. Here we go. Here's our next one. I'll pick the shortest one. Big Eyes, Small Mouth, K-pop power. Form the K-pop group of your dreams with K-pop power using the revolutionary Big Eyes, Small Mouth 3rd edition system. Can you create a perfect all-kill hit song without getting your singers murdered by obsessive fans? Write, tour, perform. Big Eyes, Small Mouth, K-pop power.
All right. I'm going to say that this one is real as well. And I'm going to say that because it's bizarre enough that I don't think that you made this one up.
Bizarre enough to come from the mind of an evil genius, Rob. This one is fake.
Okay. All right. I'm outthinking myself.
Oh, you're so owned.
I am so owned.
Big Eyes, Small Mouth is real. K-pop power is not.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. All right. Okay.
But wouldn't you want to play an anime-style role-playing game where all the characters are members of a K-pop group?
I would, and we should write that if it doesn't exist already. What's that, like, mega K-pop band?
BTS?
Which I actually, like, thought for a long time was just, like, some sort of bizarre conglomerate, because I see the name, and apparently they, like, make $1 bajillion, but they're all carbon copies of each other. But also they
listen, they all have like one thing that makes them unique.
Please,
if you're a
BTS fan, please do not crucify me. I don't know about a lot of things. This is one of the many things I don't know about. I'm not judging you if you like BTS. I know
BTS has banging hits, Rob.
I'm sure they do.
Banging.
And I'm also aware that they, like, have the GDP of several small countries, so, like, please don't murder me. I just, like, yeah. This is one of those things that I don't, like, judge, but also clearly don't understand. This is fun.
Okay,
save your rest for our future podcast. I will continue to be owned, because I have a feeling that I'm going to keep getting these wrong. So, I mean, where do we want to start with this, right? We had a DMing, like, 101 DMing basics episode early on, and we talked about some general stuff, but I think there's a lot more to talk about. So,
yes.
Where do we want to start? I guess one thing we should mention, we're not going to jump into it just yet, but the new Essentials guide has a pretty good... Is it Essentials?
It's called the Essentials Kit.
Essentials Kit.
Yeah.
Has a pretty good primer on being a DM, and we're going to discuss some of the stuff they talk about. But
I think it's pretty good for the space of 1.5 pages, right?
Right.
You can't
it's
do
short,
much,
but it's good for what it is.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's a good place to start off. And I mean, one of the things is how to DM is hard, but you can't DM without some book, right? So I think our idea is we're going to look at some of the books that you might have in your library or that some of your friends might have, and then what's the advice that builds on the advice in that book that you can use for yourself or give to your friends who are interested in becoming a dungeon master.
Yeah. And we're going to start with the basics, but I think over time, Matt and I would like to go through some of the older books, you know, from previous editions, books from other games, because a lot of other games do a better job of describing how to be a GM, how to be a DM, how to be a narrator or whatever than D&D does. And if you have one of these you're particularly happy with or that has been helpful to you, definitely let us know and we'll review it and we'll talk about the advice there. But one of the points that I made at the beginning of this episode is that the actual Dungeon Master's Guide, the OG one, you know, the core 3 or 4 books that came out with 5th edition, is a great book, but it does not tell you really what a DM is or does. So I think we've done this before, Matt, but what is a dungeon master, right? What is your role? Because this is a game, right? We were playing a game. So what is the role of the dungeon master in a game?
Right. I mean, if you think about playing a role-playing game as like a radio drama or a shared narrative, if you want to think about it in terms that are accessible to almost anyone, right? You can think of the dungeon masters wearing several different like movie or theater hats, right? A dungeon master is sort of, in some respects, a writer, right? In that they come up with some outlines of situations for players to come up with. They're, in some respects, a casting director, and they might assist the players in making their own characters, and they come up and play all of the NPCs in the world. So in that sense, they're also an actor. But they're also the director, right? In that the dungeon master is sort of responsible for where the spotlight or the camera or the microphone is at any given time, right? They've got to keep the action going and sort of facilitate that. And they often also have to be the sort of producer of the thing, the person who organizes and gets everyone together on one night. You don't have to do that, but it often falls to the dungeon master.
It often falls to you. There's also, and we like to pretend that this is important, but there are rules, and so to a limited extent, and you
this
should
isn't
not...
Air Bud. There are rules,
there are rules
to basketball.
You also
or
have to
Dungeons and
be
Dragons.
a referee to a certain extent. You have to know the rules, and you have to be willing to settle disputes. And I think that this should probably be more de-emphasized than it is for a dungeon master, but you're probably going to be called upon, especially if you're a new group, to know the rules or at least moderate disputes. And that does not mean that you have to know the rules better than everybody else, or that you can't have somebody else in the group who has their rules on lockdown. But this is an important job for you to play. So this sounds kind of intimidating, right?
Sure.
If you're starting out, it's a lot of things to do. But the good thing is that you're given a lot of tools to work with. And your players, ideally, will be working with you and supporting you and making this easy for you. Remember, you're a player too. Okay, right. One of the things that many new DMs or people who aren't familiar with the game think is that you're the boss or the director, in a sense where like you're in control, but that's not right. You're having fun too. You're playing the game. You just happen to have the heaviest lift of everybody. You're the seeker of the Quidditch team. Sure, there are other players on the field, but let's be honest.
You don't always need them.
You're deciding how the game is gonna go. Okay. Yeah.
So I think, and so the Essentials Kit for D&D 5th edition, same as I think the earlier starter set, presents the jobs of a DM as in three bins, right? Referee, storyteller, and role player, right? So you are an actor. So, right, I think if we break down those jobs, I think we can try and build on the advice given here. And I think one last point about Rob was making about the rules and referee is a good name for your job in relation to the rules, right? You don't have to know all the rules. You just have to be the one who makes a decision, right, one way or another when problems with rules come up.
Yeah. So, you need to know it helps to know where things are in the books. Again, as DM, you will probably have the books, but you don't have to have every rule on command. One thing that is sort of challenging is that you have to be able and willing to make decisions and decide, and, again, when a confusing moment comes up or when there's a disagreement, you have to be able to, mediate that and quickly. And one thing that can really help here is laying out ground rules ahead of time. And also, we should talk about this. I think we mentioned this in our first DM episode, but there's a very common, it's not written anywhere, but rule 0, which is that the DM is always right.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about rule 0.
And I want to dig in on rule 0 because I think a lot of people misunderstand what this means. This does not mean that you are...
So what is rules? Rule 0 is what the DM says goes, right?
Yes, that's it.
God
what the DM's...
This game we're playing.
Right. But what that does not mean is that you are not dictator and tyrant. You are not president for life of your gaming table. You're not God Emperor of the game. I mean, you are, but that's not a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
You're trying to make sure that everybody has fun. So this is a rule that is supposed to help the game run smoothly. And the game will not run smoothly if your players are constantly challenging you. Ideally, your players will be cooperative, and they will not do this. But even in my games, where my players like me, I sometimes have to argue about the rules with them. And you have to lay down that, look, just so that there are 3 to 5 other people at this table. We cannot spend all this time arguing about rules. So for today, for this moment, what I say is what happens, and we'll deal with it later. That is an essential part of being a dungeon master and making sure that the game runs smoothly. It is hopefully a rule you will not have to use very often, but it is a rule I think you just should establish early.
I think a good way to think about it is there was a theory in political science. I can't remember what sort of data backed it up or not, that democracies are more likely to go to war and start wars than dictatorships, right? Because democracies have a greater tolerance for unrest and protest than dictatorships that rule by fiat. Once they have the approval of people, they can do whatever the hell they want. Whereas a dictatorship can't really tolerate a lot of people protesting and unrest, right? So you might be the dictator, god emperor of your game, but you really can't piss your players off too much, or you're going to run into some problems.
Right. You have to keep them happy. And so this is an important rule.
You can do things by fiat, but make sure you kind of have the consent of your players, the happiness of your players.
Yes, you must be, a benevolent dictator. You must possess noblesse oblige. You have to be willing. You are in charge, but you have an obligation to your players to make sure that they are having fun and they feel listened to.
Right. To think about it is you can do things that would, for example, upset the characters in the game. But that's not the same as causing a rebellion among your players, the real people sitting around your table, right? Your players might recognize that this is something that makes their characters unhappy, but they recognize, this is an opportunity for exciting, dramatic, and challenging storytelling.
Yeah, I'm glad we talked about this, but this was sort of getting away from what I was trying to do, was getting to fundamentals. Right. So one of the things
rules are just a small part.
So what is it that a DM does, right? What are the absolute basics, right? So if you're just getting started, if you're on episode 80 whatever of this, you are probably not an absolute newbie, but if you're still thinking about getting started DMing, it helps to watch or listen to somebody else doing it. And I would advise that you don't go straight to Critical Role and look at Matt Mercer and think that's what being a DM is. But at its very basics, you describe a situation, right? A scenario, a location, a person, and then you prompt or allow your players to respond to it. That is basically it. You are just presenting a series of moments, places, scenarios, events, right? And this could be as creative or as
generic
as you like. And we'll talk about where you get those from, but that's the fundamental core action that a GM is taking, right? Or a DM is taking, is just describing where the players are and what they are doing, what they are seeing, what they are experiencing.
Right. This is the sort of second job of the Dungeon Master, right? The Dungeon Master as storyteller, right? And that's maybe not the best term, right? Because you are not telling the story. At the table, you're telling the story. You, however, as the Dungeon Master, have to make that first move, right?
Yes.
To say, this can be in the big sense, right? We're playing a game of Conan-esque tomb robbing and horror adventure. Or it can be as simple as, you stand outside of an ancient crumbling pyramid in the desert.
If I were describing this, it helps that there's now a lot more cultural penetration of D&D and some people have an idea of how it works. But if I were describing this to somebody who never played games before, doesn't have any idea what our role-playing game is, I would just say, look, here's a note card. Read this, description of a tomb, and then ask your players what they do. And then here's some subsequent note cards that you just continue reading. And that would not necessarily be a great game, but that is essentially the function of it, right? And as you get better, you do a better job of improvising, you learn how to anticipate things, you get better descriptions, but the real core thing is you're just presenting a series of events and scenarios to your players so that the game can continue.
Right.
And when I'm talking about fundamentals, I'm talking about fundamentals. But I was realizing as we were preparing for this that actually many of the games don't actually describe it. I was talking to somebody who had never played any role-playing game before, and they didn't actually have any idea what they were supposed to do as a Dungeon Master.
Yes.
And so that's fundamentally what you're doing. That is the core the thing that makes the game move, right? That is you, like, you know, putting coal in the engine of the role-playing game.
Yes, and generating steam to turn those cogs. Now, I mean, if there's nothing, everything else is added on. The Dungeon Master makes the first move and describes some sort of situation from you're ambushed by goblins to you all meet in a tavern. And this is actually something players can help you come up with. But everything beyond that is just adding to the fundamental mechanic of all role-playing games, which is the Dungeon Master presents a scenario, the player describes their action, and the Dungeon Master sort of describes the result. The Dungeon Master has two options or sort of several options in describing that result, right? The players can do some action and you can just respond, right? Your action succeeds. You clear the rubble out of the decaying pyramid's entrance after an hour of hard labor. They can say, no, the pyramid is sealed by a magical ward. Or you can say, make some kind of check. Roll the dice to see if the halfling can squeeze through the opening, right? Make a check based on dexterity, and then you see if it succeeds or failed. You describe the next situation based on the results of their action, and then players decide what to do next. And everything else you do adds on to that very simple circular flowchart, right?
Right.
That starts with you, the Dungeon Master.
At its very basics, you know, you are a sophisticated series of if-then statements. And the reason why people play this instead of a computer role-playing game is because there's so much more room for flexibility and dynamism in an actual in-person role-playing game with people. But if you want to break it down,
role-playing games are made of people, Rob.
They're made of people. If you want to break it down, then you are just like, here's a thing. If they do this, then that. You know, if, you know, blah, 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 blah. And you're just sort of presenting a series of scenarios. I'm describing it in this way because it may help demystify and remove some of the anxiety around starting to DM. Because it is very, if you're presented with just like, here's a book, run it, it can be very overwhelming because you think you have to have all of these NPCs and all of these ideas in your head and everything. And that is good if you are confident and you are prepared. But this does not need to be a huge, you know, undertaking for everybody. And there is Matt.
Yes.
Did you know that 1 in every 3 people who want to play Dungeons and Dragons can't because there are not enough dungeon masters to go around. There is a severe shortage of dungeon masters in
of an angel.
That's a made-up stat, but I think it is actually a problem. There are not enough dungeon masters, and we wanted to talk about helping to demystify this. And at its core, it's a pretty simple thing.
Right.
What's great is that you can start small, and then as you get better, as you get more comfortable, as you play more, you can become very, very dynamic. You can do things that nobody could ever dream of in the most sophisticated computer game. You know, you can build worlds and tell stories that are utterly unimaginable in any other medium, and that is why people play these games. But you do not have to be a great actor or a super genius or exceptionally prepared to start DMing. You just have to be a little prepared. You do have to prepare.
So here's so we described the basic mechanic of not a role-playing game, but of being a dungeon master, which is to present some situation, let your players respond in some way, and then find some resolution to your players' actions, either by saying yes, no, or having them make some kind of dice check and letting the dice resolve the situation. Now, even as a most basic beginning dungeon master, you can modify that basic mechanic, right? I think one of the easiest ways to modify it, right, is to let the players describe the outcome of the situation, right? Imagine our scenario where you make the move of your players traveling along the road are ambushed by goblins. One of the players fires an arrow at a goblin. It kills, you decide to resolve the attack by rolling the dice as would be normal. The dice hits, and instead of you describing what happens. The goblin takes an arrow to the eye and dies. Let the player describe what happens, right? So you can modify this basic mechanic by offloading some of these things to your players. Then, I think the second way you can modify this basic circular mechanic is you can make an action too as a dungeon master. You can make a move instead of just responding, right? I think this is the big balancing act of being a dungeon master, right? If you create this initial scenario and the entire game is just you responding to the players, that doesn't feel very real, right? Because other people, forces, entities, monsters, organizations in the world are also doing things. So occasionally, right, you as a dungeon master will also make a move.
Right. And this is one of the areas where I disagree just a tiny bit with the new rules on how to play as a dungeon master, because in the how to play section it says the DM describes the environment. Correct, I like that. The players describe what they want to do. Again, correct, I love this sequence of events. And then the third is the DM narrates the results of the adventurer's actions, which I'd say most of the time is true, but what Matt is describing is good, and I think it should be more of a first principle, and not, because this is seen, I think, as a like advanced dungeon master technique. Matt Mercer does this a lot and offloads a lot of narration to his players because they have a great game and they're all very good at this. But it is great to say, okay, you succeed on your check. What happens? How do you go about this particular event? I love doing this with things that my players emphasize about their characters. So if they're very acrobatic and they land a huge roll, exceed the DC by 5 or 10, I'm like, great, tell me how you go about this. And this will work better with some players than others, and not everybody likes this part of the game or being part of the spotlight. But I think every DM should get in the habit of doing this early on, because it is a shared story, and also it removes some of the narrative work from you as a DM. But otherwise, this is a good, sort of fundamental steps. But Matt's correct that
there's almost nothing you can't offload to a player or players as a dungeon master, right? Even things of the rules, right? If it's a decision you don't want to make, you can have a player look it up, right? If you want to describe the results of an action and you've decided whether it's a yes, no, or roll the dice, you can have the players describe that. Even some of the first resolutions and describing the environment, you can sort of make that first move and say you enter a darkened warehouse. You can have your players describe what is in that warehouse, right? Are there coil piles of hempen rope, or is it full of vats of acid? You could have your players describe that, right?
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to touch on, I want to go through the rest of this section. There's a short paragraph on DM tips and then one on improvising, which I like both and I like to talk about. But I wanted to, one thing I want to separate, because I also think this is something that many starting DMs get intimidated by, is one of the jobs, you'll notice one of the jobs that we did not mention for a dungeon master is world builder. So you might be confused because so much of our podcast is about world building. And it's because many DMs like this part. But you do not have to create anything if you do not want to. In fact, there are many really, really good adventures out there. And often when I am overworked or tired, or just don't have, the bandwidth, I love to pick up a published adventure. And I know enough to know which ones are good and bad, but you don't have to write anything. You don't have to make any maps if you don't want to. You don't have to invent any NPCs.
You don't have to come up with a pantheon of gods.
Right. You don't have to develop a system of coinage. If you like these things, by all means do it. But if this is if a lot of people get bogged down in their homebrew and never get started, which is a very common problem, but I understand and sympathize. But if you were trying to get started as a game master, as a DM, just pick up a module, pick up a one shot, pick up a game, run it in Forgotten Realms or Eberron or Mystara or Greyhawk or something, and work with what you've got. Especially if your group is having trouble getting started. It is, I think most DMs are probably going to do some world building, and I think most DMs like it, but it is not at all a critical part of being a DM. It is not part of one of the core jobs.
One of the jobs of the Dungeon Master is not world building, but it is role playing, right?
Yes.
You get
that
to
is
play
a key job.
as a Dungeon Master as well. Your canvas is every single creature, person, thing in the world who is not your players, right? You get the greatest job of all. Now, do you have to be a good actor or voice artist to do this? No. You just have to come up with NPCs or steal them from a published module and understand their motivations, right? And ideas and what they want, right? And this can be as simple as a hungry griffin wants to eat sheep, or a scheming wizard wants to acquire more magic items, right? But you don't have to do their voices. You don't have to act. You will want to do these things as you get better, right? But that's all you have to do is these NPCs.
Yeah. That's all window dressing, and it's good, and it's fun, and it's what makes the game better, but none of that is essential to running the game. Again, this is all about just getting you down at a table, helping you start the game. I know a lot of people have trouble getting started, and a lot of groups are struggling for a DM. And this is just, I feel like once you get started, all of this stuff sort of comes naturally, but you don't have to start from Matt Mercer levels of dungeon mastering, right? He's been doing it for what? Like us, like 20 years, maybe? You know, the Critical Role crowd has been playing together for like 10 years or something like that every Thursday for hours. So don't worry about getting to that when you're just starting out. Just get going, and then you'll start building your own things. Let's talk about the rest of the advice and the essentials.
Okay, yeah.
Kit.
So there's a section called DM tips. What's the next one? Or what's the first one?
The first one is, when in doubt, make it up. It's better to keep the game moving than to get bogged down in the rules. I strongly agree. I think there's probably nothing more important. I am a big proponent of keeping the game moving. Often to the point of sort of, I don't railroad, but I definitely like push my players to make quick decisions, because there's nothing that kills energy, momentum, and fun than stopping the game to argue about something.
Right. This applies in two scenarios, right? One in sort of a rules-based thing. You don't know what the result is of an action according to the rules. As you dungeon master, you will acquire a game sense that will help you come up with fair rulings. We've talked about this on the show before, but start off with, if the players are trying to do something and you don't know how to resolve it, think of it as, have them roll a dice. On a 4, 5, or 6, it succeeds. On a 1, 2, or 3, it fails. And then add some complications to that, right? If they're good at it, it's a 3, 4, 5, or 6, it succeeds. And the same applies not just to mechanics, but to story, right? If you're not...
And your players, we've talked about this too, this happens to me a lot in my games. Your players are getting bogged down in the story. They're not sure how to proceed. They're bickering or arguing or dithering over the next decision. Poke them. Say, you're out of time. You got to make a decision. Something happens, and just keep it going. Don't stop them if it's a good conversation, but keep it moving. And that's really what this applies to. You know, it just means that make sure that the action is continuing to proceed. Again, it helps to think of yourself as a director. The game is a movie or a TV show or a book. It's okay to have a little bit of, exposition, a little bit of conversation, but don't let it drag on, right? Don't lose your audience, which is you and the players.
Building on that point of movie or thing, right? Think of the purpose of the scene, of what's going on. If your players are sitting around as their characters discussing whether to betray their employer who's helped them out after they found out that their employer was a secret cultist, right? The point of the scene is to have a dramatic discussion. Then that's a time you don't need to make them move on. If they're arguing about something that is not important, and you can tell that several people at the table are really, really bored, and only 2 of your players are into it, that's when to make them move forward.
Yeah. You'll get a better sense for this, like Matt said, as a game sense as you play more. But it's... I think this is a critically important rule. Okay, what's the next one, Matt?
Embracing a shared story. Now, this is, I think, a good mantra to keep at your side, right? Remember we talked about, as you make up the resolution to these things, the people at your table are going to have desires and hopes for what they might want the story to be. So this could be as simple as if players have come to your table and they want to stop evildoers as heroic characters, making sure there are opportunities for their characters to do just that.
Yeah. It's as simple as asking, especially if your players are not jumping in on their own, ask them what their characters are doing. At any point, just make sure to prompt them, I also like to use character names when addressing people, so, Ragnar Stonefist, what are you doing at this moment? Right. And it's that simple. It's just getting them involved, making sure that they're present in the moment and know what their player character is up to in the scene.
And sharing is caring, right? A role-playing game is not a conversation between the dungeon master and whoever is the most outgoing, brash, or least inhibited player at the table, right? Your job is to keep everyone involved in the story.
Yeah. All right. The next tip is another good one. I like this one a lot. It's not a competition. The DM is not competing against the player characters. Your job is to referee the rules, run monsters, and keep the story moving. I think this is a pretty common mistake for early new DMs to make. The thing is, it's not a competition because you run the game. If you want to win, you will just win. You can just rocks fall, everyone dies anytime you want. If you are trying to beat your characters by creating, increasingly challenging and punishing encounters, that's okay if your group likes that. But if you're just trying to show off how clever you are or, create really unpleasant and difficult combats, that's not what the game is about. It's about creating a shared story. It's about being the referee. Again, not, the dictator, even though you technically are benevolent, remember. And it's about, keeping the story moving.
Yeah, the goal, right? You got to remember what the goal of this game is. It's different than the goals of other games, right? The goal is to have fun, right? By telling amazing shared experiences, not like a board game where you want to collect the most victory points.
Right, exactly. There's no win condition for D&D. It's just having fun.
All right, the next tip is being consistent and fair, right? One of the things that's most frustrating from the other side of the table is when the world doesn't work in the way that players expect it to work, right? If a player has something that worked last time and it doesn't work this time, that can be really frustrating, right? You want your game to work in a logical, though often science fiction or fantastical manner. And that's a good goal to shoot for.
It's a good goal. This also applies to Rule 0 in a good way. So this is the key part about you being the dictator, about you, everything you say goes. That's fine. You just must apply the rules consistently and fairly. If you're going to say, I'm sorry, this is the way that it is, we're going to move on, that's fine as long as you do it that way every single time. It becomes a problem if you are not consistent in the way that you are applying your rules or exercising your power. So this is a really important thing to remember as a DM, is that you must be consistent.
And consistent and fair are, I think, not always aligned. And if I had to pick one of the two, right, I would pick fair, right? Sometimes a sort of internal logical consistency to a rule might end up really screwing over someone and robbing them of what could be a joyful or challenging or exciting moment. And in those sort of edge case scenarios, as a dungeon master, 99% of the time, I'm going to pick fair. I'm going to pick the thing that makes sure that everyone's really having fun.
Yeah, me too. And look, this is a good time to like start practicing putting aside your ego, because I have been wrong a bunch. And when I have been wrong and I've been applying a rule a certain way, I'll say, hey, I'm sorry, everybody. I was wrong about this rule. I think it's better the way that it's written. From here on out, I'll be applying it this way. I apologize for the times in the past. And I'll also do this with story. I'm like, look, I made a mistake. I messed up somewhere, or I made an error in the narrative, or I misspoke, or I got something wrong. So here's how it actually is. Here's how it will be moving forward. And I'll do that in a way that, as long as it's not disruptive, but it's more important to be fair than to stick to, like Matt said, consistency, to the point of, iron rigidity and, not making the game enjoyable. So make sure to balance these. But it is important to have some sort of, again, consistency within the way you're applying them. And if you are applying them to be applying your rules and methods to be fair, as Matt and I try to, then that's, your players are going to be happy. But this is important to keep in mind. Don't be capricious. Don't be, random or inconsistent with, rigid applications of rules, because that is very frustrating, like Matt said, from the other side of the table.
Yes, absolutely. The next tip is... Oh, go ahead.
The next tip is modify the adventure to suit your tastes. Matt and I have talked about this a ton. You don't have to do anything, but you also don't have to follow the adventure as written.
Whether it's something that you've bought off the shelf or something you've written yourself, right?
Yes.
This applies equally to both of those.
Again, this is why this is better than just playing Baldur's Gate 2 or 3 again, or, Fallout New Vegas, because you can modify the game on the fly in a way that is not... Follow your players, listen to what's going on, follow your heart. Maybe you're interested in a different thing. Maybe something came up that's not really what the adventure is about as you wrote it or as written. That's okay. That's great. And definitely, if your players are interested in something that is not important, feel free to explore that. That's one of the great things about being a Dungeon Master and about playing this game, is that you have the flexibility to let the story go wherever it wants to. So enjoy that. Listen to that. Lean into it. Don't let yourself be bound by... anything, really. That's the lesson here.
Yeah, there are no bounds, and it's better to go with what your players find interesting or what you find interesting than what you had written out beforehand or what was in the module. The last tip given here in the Essentials Kit is keep a notepad and some graph paper handy. I think this fits under the referee part of the job.
It does.
And it's one we haven't talked about.
Oh, we haven't?
Well, in that we talked about how you're a referee and that you have to find a resolution to the rules and keep things moving. But you're also a referee in that you have to keep track of points and stats and fouls.
Initiative and yeah.
So this will help with that, but it's also important for the story, right? Your players might not remember which of the 3 weird hags in the dark swamp they made a deal with. You've got to write that down, right?
You got to write that down, yeah.
Because it's your job to keep track of the story your players are creating, or keep track of what's important in that story.
You will always do more of this. However, I insist, so you can offload a lot of this to your players.
Again, all these jobs can be offloaded to some degree or another to your players.
You will always do most of this because you're gonna know more about the importance of certain things than your players will. But for something like, here's a good example that I like to offload in every game, is loot. If your players want loot, and they do, they can keep track of it themselves. And I will read and tell them what they found, and I will create all of that. But if they want to know what their characters are carrying, that's on them. And this works better if you don't have, like, cheating players. But, assuming there's, like, a level of trust between you, be like, look, one of you has to be a records keeper, and you have to write down how much gold you have and what items you have, and you have to figure that out. But it is important that you have, notes. You do have to be a decent note taker, right? To be a DM. You should know the marching order, the initiative. You should have, a little bit of idea of like what's going on in the area. You got to keep track of monster stats, that sort of thing. How many rounds a spell is, if it's going to expire soon. So, have something, scratch paper. I actually usually open up a Google Doc and, write a bunch of things in there because I'm an insufferable digital native. But it's better with a pad and paper, probably. But this is a good tip. It's almost like not even worth mentioning because you will have to do it anyway just to make it through your first session. But again, it might not seem obvious if you're literally just starting out, so it's a good tip.
The next section of the Essentials Kit has some, I think, basic advice. I would quibble with how it's presented, which is how to create checks for your players, improvising ability checks.
Mm-hmm.
Rob, we talked about the basic flow of an adventure. Dungeon Master presents a situation, players describe their action, Dungeon Master picks a resolution. In that Dungeon Master picks a resolution, this is basically how to do that.
And this is good general advice, but the problem is that there's no real like one good or right way to do this. I do think this is a useful shorthand, right? DC 10 is easy, DC 15 is moderate, DC 20 is hard.
Right. So these are basically you have a base 75% chance of succeeding for something easy, a 50-50 for a medium, a base 25% chance for succeeding on something hard. That's all that those DCs are saying if you're very, very new.
And that's a great way to start. And the thing is, this is a good thing to put in here because you are going to quickly run into, if your players are being creative, they're going to say, can I do this? And you'll be like, sure, pick an ability check. And it's a good way to just sort of like have in your mind. I would, if you can't remember these off the top of your head at first, it's just like, to get a sticky note and write down easy, moderate, hard, and the numbers next to them, and just improvise every time your players ask you to do something that's not really like covered by the rules, which they will do, and they will do quickly.
So I think Dungeon World and a couple other games present this in a slightly different way, you know, based on their own mechanics and rules. But the basics here is that when a player describes their action and a Dungeon Master tells the results, there are 3 questions you have to answer as a Dungeon Master. When are you going to just say, yes, what you just described happens. I describe it happening, or you describe it happening. 2, when to just say, no, the thing you described to do is impossible and is not going to work. Or 3, which is often the most interesting case, when to say, roll the dice. Okay, that thing you're trying, it might succeed, it might not. Roll these dice. Here's the easy, medium, or hard difficulty DC.
Yeah.
That's how I would present this information.
I think so too. Okay, so that's the Essentials Kit. There's not a whole lot there, but this was a good place for us to start this series.
So are there some final takeaways we can have for dungeon mastering from this title here?
I mean, the takeaways are that, like, the mechanical, to me, the takeaway from this is, like, the mechanical function of a DM is actually very, very easy. I think that's what this talks about, and why it's only a page and a half of, you know, what you need to just start doing the dungeon master job. Now, to do it well, or even to do it, you know, middlingly well, requires a great deal more. But I think this is a good way to illustrate that the fundamental key part of being a DM is pretty basic, and you can start with just what's provided here. We are going to build on this a lot, and there's a lot more beginner basic how to DM tips, but this is a good place to start.
I think it's a good place to start, and the 3 jobs of a dungeon master: referee, storyteller, role player. I like this. I would present it as the sort of 3 goals of a dungeon master. Referee, goal 1, you're there to find a resolution and keep the game moving forward. 2, storyteller, you're there to challenge your players with interesting situations and scenarios and obstacles. 3, role player, you're there to entertain your players with NPCs and a fully realized world or adventure. So those are your goals. Find resolutions, challenge your players, entertain the people at your table.
That's a good start. Stay tuned for more of this. And if there's something that you like or something you'd like us to discuss about the basics of dungeon mastering, absolutely let us know, and we will cover it. But we're going to talk about, I think we'll talk about Dungeon World next time we do this. I love that book's, that system's approach to storytelling, and I think it's very, very valuable for people playing Dungeons & Dragons. But that's all for now on this. And we are going to answer some emails.
Our very first email is a crazy email called a voicemail.
Ooh, okay.
So calling into the Dungeon Master hotline. Rob, what's that number?
That number is 774-203-4629. One more time. 774-203-4629. That stands for what, Matt?
RPG 20D Hoax.
RPG 20D Hoax. At one last time, it is 774-203-4629. Call in and have your voice heard by literally dozens of people every week.
This is Dalton from Emails Past. I have a high wisdom group, a cleric, a druid, a ranger, and a barbarian with decent wisdom. That means they can see all the problems, but they don't have the means to solve any of them. There's no skill monkey, and there are no wizard fixers. My question is, how do I, as a DM, adjust for this? The modules that I run assume that someone somewhere knows how to deal with these things, even though no one in my group does. I've thought about creating a homebrewed item that is basically a portrait of a lady in a locket that used to be a wizard or something that can do identify for them or detect magic or, succeed on Arcana or history checks. Is this a good compromise, or am I just rationalizing my need to lore dump on my players? Any advice is welcome. Thanks, guys.
So, this is great. I love this group of anti-civilization characters. Druid, wizard, druid, barbarian, ranger.
Yeah, I love this. This rustic group of wilderness adventurers. This is kind of an interesting question because I think the standard response is, "Oh, you don't need any sort of whatever to have fun at a game." But it is true that if you lack somebody who can detect magic or who can identify or has some of those specific arcane or intelligence-based things, you're going to run into some sort of frustrating situations. It's not required, but it's annoying to not know what your items are. It's annoying to not have the ability to know if an item is magical or in what way. And so I do think there is sort of a need to address here. I like Dalton's solution. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think an item that
you have a box that you press a button and a wizard pops out for 10 minutes. That's great, right?
That's great. Put some limits on it, make it expensive, make them work for it. But I think that's a good solution.
One use thing. Now, as opposed to the solution of do you need high intelligence players otherwise? I think you might need those specific spells, detect magic, identify, and giving them an item to use, that's fine. But I don't think you need a high intelligence people to solve the game.
No,
play the game.
The difference between a wizard casting or using knowledge history, or not, it's not knowledge anymore. A wizard, having the history skill and a druid having the history skill is a few points if they're both proficient, right? Potentially 4 if they're a crazy high int wizard, but still, it's not like your player characters can't do those things. So it's a question of whether or not it's really important to have a specific int focused. I do think the game runs a little smoother when you have specialized roles. I do think that's fun, and it works well when you've got a smart guy, a strong guy, and a wise person who can perceive things, but you don't need that.
I think it's a great opportunity for these high wisdom, non-sophisticated characters to stumble into situations that are over their heads and have fun ways of dealing with them. So I think solution, give them the specific magic items to let them do the one or two things, but don't worry that none of them are book smart.
Yeah. The other solution that
give them treasure of a bunch of rare books that none of them care about.
None of them can read. The other thing that you can do that I've liked in the past is give them a retainer. Give them a wizard retainer or whatever that follows them around or stays in a nearby town that they can take things to, who will cast Identify or whatever. Obviously, don't make this person very powerful. It's not a DM PC, but if you want to give them an NPC that can help them with this, that's a totally viable solution.
I love the party of high wisdom people that can see every problem coming. But they're never caught by surprise. They just don't know what to do next.
Just don't know what to do.
Perfect.
I love it. It's great. Yeah. Thanks for calling in, Dalton. I hope this is helpful.
Yeah. Thanks, Dalton. All right. Rob, what's our next?
Our next one is from Adam, who writes, Hey, DM Matt and Rob. Love the podcast, and I've been DMing a small 3-person party for about 8 months or so. Shortly after I started, I discovered the pod, and it's been so helpful. I've done my best to listen to the DM tips and unwanted advice episodes, but I haven't listened to every single episode, so you may have addressed this. If so, my bad. We'll find out. I'm not sure if we have. You talk a lot about rolling out in the open. For combat roles, this is definitely something I'm going to try in my next session, as I think my party will love it. But I wonder about rolling for stealth checks, random encounters, etc., etc. I get the sense that my players like the feeling of suspense that comes with not knowing what I'm rolling for or why. Am I making this all about me and getting high off the drama this creates, or do you think it's smart to keep some roles behind the screen? Seems like a simple question, but I always value the wisdom and humor y'all bring to the somewhat simple stuff. Thanks a lot for everything you do, and keep up the great podcast, Adam.
Ooh, good point, Adam.
Adam,
Yeah.
This is a really good point. Thank you for writing in. This is a great point.
So we've talked about rolling in the open as it creates drama, and that when you answer, as we were talking about earlier, when you answer that question of, yes, this happens, no, this is impossible, or 3, roll the dice and it might be possible, it really is saying that, hey, as the dungeon master, when I say roll the dice, that means it is up to some degree to random chance and the stats on your character sheet, right? And if you don't roll in the open, that sort of trust in that is not there. But Adam makes a very good point.
It's a very good point. The two examples that Adam uses are great examples. So yeah, I think it depends on your players, but definitely for like stealth checks or perception checks to oppose stealth checks, it can create a lot of tension, especially if you don't want your players to know if they've been detected. Right. That's a really good point. So if it's a high stealth moment and it's tense and you want there to be guards around, but you don't want your players to know if they've been detected, yeah, absolutely, you might want to roll behind a scrand. Random encounters is another good one too. I don't roll a lot for random encounters, but I do sometimes, and I tend to do those behind the screen, because the players don't know what those roles mean.
So here's the rubric for determining what are the sort of edge cases where you might roll in secret. Well, it's if their characters sort of would have no knowledge of what this role means or what its success is, right? They don't have the table of random encounters. So if you roll out in the open, they don't care, right?
Yeah.
A 13's the same as a 31. Right? And the same with the stealth check, right? If the characters have no knowledge of whether they've been detected by the guard or not, roll in secret. But if they are like watching the guard and seeing if the guard notices them, noticing them back and forth, then make it in the open.
Yeah. Also, if you are going to do this, make sure you get in the habit of rolling behind the screen regularly, just for various things, so that your players get a sense for what the distinction is. Make sure you're consistent, like we said earlier. Roll in open for combat. And again, we talked about you don't have to do this, but I do like to roll in the open for combat, just so that it feels fair, and it does create a lot of drama. But, your players will learn to know that sometimes there are things you're rolling for that might affect them or might not. It can be, I guess what the reason I bring this up is, can be your players will notice when you're rolling, and if you only roll behind the screen every now and then, they're going to be like on high alert when you do that. So make sure you're consistent, maybe even do some fake rolls here and there.
Right.
But yeah.
I think we've both said we always roll in the open, and this letter has proved that that is not true, right?
Yeah.
If you need to randomly determine something that only you need to know, like, for example, you have a wandering troll that patrols the second level of your dungeon, and there's a 25% chance he's in each of 4 rooms, and you roll that to see where that creature is, right? Your players don't need to know that information, right? They have no idea what the roll means, right?
Yeah.
I roll that behind the screen.
Yeah, Adam, this is a great point. I every time there's like a random chance, a D100, this happens, that happens, I roll that behind the screen. The players don't know what that means. They don't need to know those numbers. So this is a great point.
However, if it's something the players have knowledge of, are going to immediately recognize, roll it out in the open. You have nothing to lose in those situations, right?
Yeah. Adam, great point. Great question. Thank you for writing in. And I hope this is helpful. Yeah.
Do you want to do one more, Rob?
Yeah, let's do one more.
Here's a letter on Twitter from Alexander. Hey, favorite podcast hosts, I'm DMing a 5e game coming from 4e. I really hate how feats just kind of got dropped from the game. I remember there was an episode of DMON where you guys came up with your half feat variant, but I can't find which episode it was. Do you guys remember? Also, your acronym DMON, which sounds like demon when said out loud, pretty badass.
Metal. Matt, this was your homebrew invention, right? The half feet?
Yes. I'm sure I'm not the only person who has ever been like, hey, all of the feats in 5th edition can easily be split into 2 parts. There are some feats that give you a stat boost and some that don't. So I can't be the only person who's come up with this. I believe it was in episode, I don't know, maybe, I have no idea. I was searching through our stuff.
Regardless, we may be able to find the episode, but we do have the rules, and they're pretty simple. They're just dividing it into, right, like you just get 2 different things, 2 different benefits over time, or at one level and then another at another level. Is that right, Matt?
Right. So, I mean, I basically took every feat, and some feats already have feats, right? They already only give you one tiny thing and an ability boost. So those, I just took out the ability boost. Feats that don't, I've divided up into smaller scale things. So I think, and on our homebrew page and linked in the show notes, I'll have a link to the half feat variant rules I've come up with. And I think my basic idea for how to implement these is if you want your characters to have more feats, you could always give them this feat every 3 levels, right? They start with 1 and they get 1 every 3 levels, or every 4 levels when they get an ability score increase. In addition to getting, 2 ability score increases, they also get a feat. Or you can just keep it at the same trade-off of you can trade out an ability score improvement for a feat. You can either use these rules to make your characters more powerful or keep them at the exact same power level.
Yeah.
It just gives them more modularity in their characters.
We'll do a little write-up and we'll put it... We'll put it up for free, but
it's on the homebrew page already.
Oh, that's right, it's on the homebrew page.
It's been there for years.
We'll link it. But yeah, thank you for writing in, for messaging us, and I hope this is helpful. There are other, like Matt said, other people have come up with similar ideas. Feats are probably one of the least well-developed parts of 5th edition, and so there's a lot of fixes. This is the one that we kind of like, but there are other things you can do.
Other people have come up with it, but I googled 5e half feats, and our 2 things are the very first first result. So maybe we should just claim this.
All right, our idea, Matt's idea. Matt, I'm going to give you credit for this. Okay. I did not do this.
The designers put almost no thought into feats. They tacked them on, and they made them very difficult for most players.
Specifically made them an alternate rule, which, boy, I do not care for. If you're gonna... sorry.
Also, if you want to be cool and have a feat, you've got to, put off having a 20 in an ability score, which is, a thing that there's no reason not to have. It makes you better at almost everything.
Listen, as somebody who played fighters in 3.5, I definitely agree that feats were garbage, but this was not the solution. This was not how to fix it. Okay, so we'll link that. If you have further questions, definitely let us know. And yeah, thanks everybody. If you have questions for us, please email us at dmofnone@gmail.com. Add us on Twitter at dmofnone. Call in, as we mentioned, at our number 774-203-4629.
774-203-4629.
And we'll answer it on the air. But thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for all your questions. I look forward to more discussions of the basics of DMing. If you are one of the people who listens to this and hasn't started yet, but want to, just do it. You can do it. Everybody can DM. We want you to bring the glory and joy of Dungeons and Dragons to the masses, and yeah, hopefully we help make that happen.
Keep rolling those dice.
Keep rolling those dice, everybody.
I've got Dungeon Master's Guide. I've got 12-sided die. I've got Kitty Pride and Nightcrawler too. Waiting there for me, yes I do. I've got posters on the wall. My favorite rock group Kiss. I've got Ace Free.